they've gone to the point now of trying to argue that the records of the Epstein case were created by people working for Obama and Biden. I mean, that tells you how desperate they are to come up with something that will stick to make this go away. I don't think this is likely to go away.
Hi, I'm Joe Crawford and welcome to Times Radio's Trump Report. Today I'm joined by David Cay Johnston, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, professor at Rochester Institute of Technology and author of an array of books on Donald Trump. Thank you for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Glad to be with you again, Joe.
So Trump has accused Obama and Biden of making up the existence of the Epstein files, but he said that Pam Bondi should release whatever she thinks is credible on Epstein. And now we're seeing Trump facing both backlash from some of his party and from the wider MAGA base. What do you make of this, David?
Well, Donald Trump really has a very serious problem here, and it's going to come at him both from the MAGA base and from the Democrats. Jeffrey Epstein described himself in a tape-recorded interview 20-some years ago as one of Donald Trump's his very best friend. There's lots of video and still images of Donald Trump together with Jeffrey Epstein at parties with young women who appear to be teenagers. And Donald Trump campaigned saying that he would release all of these records. Why did he do that? Well, because the conspiracy theory he tried to sell for a long time is that it was Democrats who were partying like Prince Andrew with girls as young as 14 years old. Once he gets into office, Pam Bondi, who had been Attorney General of the state of Florida when a lot of this went on, said, I have the list right here on my desk of who the clients were. Now, keep in mind that it doesn't mean there's literally a list that ticks off names. There are documents establishing who went to his pleasure island, who was on the planes, who was staying at his townhouse in New York. And suddenly they don't want to release them. And Elon Musk said, well, that's very obvious. It's because Donald's name is in the files. And I'm sure Donald's name is in the files without any question. Whether he engaged in inappropriate conduct is another matter that we don't have the evidence on. But I would point out that Donald has, among other things, said to a 10-year-old girl, in 10 years, I'm going to date you. He's talked about how he would be dating his daughter, Ivanka, if she weren't his daughter, and has a long history of things like walking in on the nude and almost nude 14 and 15-year-old girls at one of his beauty pageants because he said, I had a right to inspect. So certainly a lot of smoke there, but no fire. Now, the MAGA base was promised all of this would be made public. And it's like, you've broken our promise. And Tucker Carlson, the TV personality, is among the people who are the most severe critics of this. Crowds asked at the Turning Point USA conference, that's a very right-wing, I would argue, anti-democratic organization, they booed the idea of not releasing these documents. On the other side, the Democrats recognize that there's something here where Trump is very vulnerable, and they've made it clear that if they can win control of the House, which would take place in January of 2027, they will be all over this with subpoenas and investigators.
For Trump's side of things, he's denied any wrongdoing in relations to Epstein. And in terms of these potential files that people want to have released, they have been shrouded by a lot of conspiracy theories as well, haven't they? Especially about who was on this list, also potentially relating to Epstein's suicide in 2019. But it's interesting how we saw Trump very much sort of fan the flames there. If we look back to his election campaign, he said that he would probably release these alleged files. In February, we saw Pam Bondi hand out those big binders of what she said was these Epstein files, even though most of the records there were already available publicly. And then now we've got Trump saying that it's only pretty bad people, including fake news, who want to keep asking for the release of these files. It's interesting to see that juxtaposition there between Trump sort of fanning the flames before he came into office for the second time, and now him, Pam Bondi, they appear to be backtracking on a lot of these claims they previously made.
Absolutely, because they're now in a position where these files might have to actually go out into the public record. And that, I suspect, would be incredibly damaging, not just to Donald Trump, but to some other high-level folks. Now, Epstein, who died under not clear circumstances in a federal prison during Trump's first administration, it turns out that part of the video monitoring of his cell area is missing. Pam Bondi said 1 minute was missing. Wired magazine, which specializes in technology, says there's more like 3 minutes missing, and there appear to be multiple splices in the video. They hired video forensic experts. But then you have to look at Epstein himself. Epstein was a man with no known acumen investing, and yet various people, after they had partied with him, gave him hundreds of millions of dollars to invest, which raises the question of whether he was running an extortion racket with people he'd compromised. The Trump administration is now suggesting, no, there's no basis for thinking that whatsoever. Well, okay, then why were people giving this man with no track record part of their fortune to invest? What was going on here? And then finally, it's important to remember that law enforcement got on to Epstein a long time ago. He should have gotten a very severe federal sentence, potentially a life sentence. And instead, he got absolute minimal sweetheart treatment, which the Miami Herald's Julie Brown has done an extraordinary job of running down and detailing for readers kind of treatment for someone involved in child rape. And that's what this is. At 14 years old, you do not have any legal capacity to give consent. Bringing girls from Europe on his private jets to his island and other activities, and numerous accusers who've come forward. It's very clear that there's much more here, and I can see why, now that they're in office, the administration doesn't want to release this. The problem they face is that the MAGA base might peel away from Donald Trump, or at least some of the MAGA base. And it's not nobodies who are doing this. It is prominent figures. Former Fox host Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, who started Turning Point USA, and others, demanding that they release these files.
And of course, we don't have substantial evidence to draw any substantial conclusions here. And, I think that's the whole thing with conspiracies, is that in the lack of presence of evidence, that's where we see a lot of conspiracy theories growing. Not just with these Epstein files, it's a common trend among other areas. And I think that's what's interesting here, is that it's not just Trump, but several members of the Trump administration, some of his prime supporters and advocates, they've been proponents of conspiracy theories, not just the Epstein files, but for example about Obama's birthplace, for example. And you could argue that that's helped to fuel and grow the support of the MAGA fan base, the MAGA cohort. It's built into that narrative of trying to drain the swamp, and how Trump was saying that he was coming to expose the truth about there being this big deep state. I mean, when we look at that sort of language and how he sort of fostered those conspiratorial ideas, it has helped to build up this movement of people that believe in what he's saying. But now he's sort of turned his head and is now saying a completely different thing. How is this all going to play out?
Donald Trump, in building his MAGA movement, has relied on conspiracy theories, some of them just wildly crazy out there, that Joe Biden was drinking the blood of sacrificed children, and Hillary Clinton was involved in baby raping, and other absolute nonsense, to the point where a guy with an assault rifle showed up at Comet Pizza because he believed the stories that the basement of Comet Pizza was used to rape and murder children and have their blood drunk. There's no basement in that building, and he arrived and found happy families having pizza dinners. Complete, utter nonsense. The problem when you spread these kinds of theories, as Donald Trump has been doing, these wild, crazy ideas, is they can come back to haunt you when you make a promise that you're going to make everything right. And this is not about anything except Donald's belief. When I've been chronicling what he's been doing for almost 40 years. I wrote about him becoming president in 1988. Donald's belief that he is the only person who should be at the head of the U.S. government. He claims that he is all powerful. He can do whatever he wants under the U.S. Constitution, which is utterly untrue. And he has managed to scare the Republicans into becoming quislings, basically. Almost none of them will stand up to him, and the few who have find that in a primary race, they get beaten by somebody who is loyal to Donald Trump without question.
How would you say this is planning out now, especially amongst MAGA supporters? We've got, a lot of MAGA influencers there who are very upset and angry about this. But do you think this is substantial? Do you think that this is going to have a long-lasting impact?
Well, Trump's number one goal right now is to say, this doesn't matter, let's get on to the important things. And he's made several Truth Social postings, and those only seem to have enraged many members. And America is full of videos right now of just sort of ordinary MAGA folks who are clearly very angry and upset about this, even if they can't articulate exactly what it is that troubles them. So if he cannot succeed in getting people to let this die, then he's got a real problem.
It's also interesting to see how the Republican Party is taking this information. We've got Mike Johnson, he's the Republican Speaker of the House. He's urged the Justice Department to make public any documents linked to Epstein. We've got Marjorie Taylor Greene. She says she fully supports transparency on this issue alongside others. But then interestingly, we've got former proponents of Epstein conspiracies like Kash Patel, who Trump appointed to be director of the FBI, who's now, even a few days ago, posted on X that conspiracy theories just aren't true, never have been, in relation to these Epstein files. It's interesting to watch this divide here. What do you think about it?
Well, you're seeing the difference between people who are absolutely dependent on Donald Trump and totally loyal, and someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's going to get reelected forever no matter what she does in the district that she's in, so she can have some independence from him. And she's a very big conspiracy theorist. Remember, she's the one who thought there were Jewish space lasers causing wildfires and other absolute nonsense. This is very much going to be a test of whether Donald can suppress this rebellion. And the argument that's hurting him, being made both by some MAGA leaders and by Democrats, is if there's nothing there that's of any harm to you, wouldn't you want to be out there and put those in the record right now to establish that this is all nonsense? I mean, what better motive could you possibly have but to completely clear your name? And if you don't want to do that, why would that be? And that's the box Trump is in. So if he can, this is old news, and get the fury over this to pass, then he wins. But come January 2027, when I think it's pretty clear the Democrats are likely to take back the House, that will change.
I mean, with Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think that she's an interesting case here. I mean, I've interviewed her myself. She accused me of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, of the downfall of America, which I'm not to blame for. But, she does like conspiracy. She definitely promotes a few of those herself. But she's also an ardent supporter of Trump. She's been a long-standing supporter of Trump. And it's interesting here to see, maybe she is picking a side now.
Yeah, I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is so, in the vernacular, crazy that like Donald, you don't know what she's going to do next. I mean, one of the important things about Donald is because he is appallingly ignorant. I mean, didn't even know what happened on December 7th, 1941 in Honolulu. He can turn on a dime. His seeming for the moment to have switched sides from Moscow to Kyiv, that could turn around tomorrow morning or this afternoon. So you're dealing here with people who, not being rooted in facts and not having a clear philosophy, jump all over the place depending on what they see in the moment as being an advantage for them.
I mean, if we look back at this second presidency of Trump, we've got things like the Houthi leaked chats, we've got the market turmoil following Liberation Day. I mean, when we look at those examples, it didn't cause any sort of outrage in comparison to what we're seeing now of these Epstein cases amongst the MAGA cohort. Why do you think that is?
No, this is the first big break that he has faced. Frankly, I think a lot of people thought that adding the editor of the Atlantic magazine, however inadvertent, to a chat about attack plans in Yemen, they dropped $500 million worth of bombs on the Houthis with no significant effect. That would be an issue. Also, they used an unsecure channel to do so, a commercial service. Well, Mike Walls, the guy who caused this problem, is still on the White House payroll today. Trump has put him up to be ambassador to the United Nations. Those issues, I think, are too esoteric for the MAGA crowd. I mean, the essential element of the MAGA crowd is that they are not well educated and they lack critical thinking skills. That is not to say they're stupid. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they don't have an education. And what does Donald say at every rally? We love the poorly educated. And these folks don't even understand that's an insult. And by the way, that's part of the whole reason Trump has been able to get ahead, is that we have so degraded public education in the United States that many, many people, including students I teach sometimes, don't understand that how an idea becomes a bill, becomes a law. They think the president just declares a law. So this is an issue everybody can understand. Middle-aged men having sex with girls who are underage, that doesn't require any significant thinking skills to understand that. And combine that with this promise, you were going to show us that, Joe Biden was doing this and Obama, and they've gone to the point now of trying to argue that the records of the Epstein case were created by people working for Obama and Biden. I mean, that tells you how desperate they are to come up with something that will stick to make this go away. I don't think this is likely to go away, but it could potentially lead to a deeper break within the MAGA movement. It may not. I mean, a lot of that will depend on Donald's skill here at managing this and attacking those who are challenging him, or finding ways to intimidate them or cajole them over to his view.
David, thank you so much for joining me on the Trump Report.
Thank you, Joe.